My name is Amanda, and this is my first project. It's comparing Spanish and British America. Comparing Spanish and British America. The settlement of Isabella and Plymouth. Now, Isabella and Plymouth had the clear difference that the Spanish settled the Hispaniola Isabella area, while the Pilgrims of the English settled Plymouth. The Spaniard Christopher Columbus had led the first voyage to the Bahamas and Cuba area with only 3 ships and about 100 men. He left 40 of his men there to start camp and sailed back to Spain for more provisions. Columbus came back with 17 ships and 1,200 more men, only to find the village destroyed with no survivors left, with the probable explanation of native attackers. With nothing left for him there, he set off to set up a new village named Isabella in search of a town named Cibao, which was supposedly filled with riches of gold and silver. He was now at an advantage over the land with many more men and supplies. The land was plentiful, with good climate, and food was sown and buildings were built. Now back to Plymouth. The English William Bradford led the Pilgrims' voyage to Plymouth. He also only came with only 100 men, but did not have plans to go back and retrieve more provisions. Unfortunately, the voyage also was not funded or chartered, while Columbus was fully funded and chartered by Queen Elizabeth. Although they had less funds, the Pilgrims were more skilled and settled as families. On the downside, they settled during a harsh winter, which brought upon them many diseases and a difficult land to grow food. Over half of them had died, but the healthy helped look after the sick and provided comfort to help some people make it through the winter. On Columbus's side, after a few months the people were starting to fatigue, due to not being used to having no conveniences and actually having to do their own labor, and actually caused some of them to even get ill or even die. They were angered that they had found no riches yet, so Columbus set off most of the ships and men to accelerate the finding of Cibao. With less people around, some men conspired to steal the remaining ships to sail back to Spain and return to their lives of comfort. Columbus found of this plan and punished the men. This was the first case of mutiny in the Indies. This whole episode in Isabella is much different than how the Pilgrims would have handled the situation. They were of caring and loving personalities and would have tried to help one another instead. Columbus left his brother in charge to set off and explore for gold in other areas, and ended up setting up St. Thomas when he found some Indians that provided him with gold and silver and copper. He returned a few months later to the town of Isabella, only to find that many of the men had died, and those who were alive had become sick, all due to much of the food spoiling due to the damp and hot weather, and the weaknesses that the men had from being used to a life of convenience. The town was abandoned, and Columbus sought off to take control and power of the natives that had begun to attack St. Thomas while he was gone. Now the Pilgrims, having had half of their people make it through the winter, started to explore more westward to be greeted kindly by a group of Indians. One of the natives, named Samoset, spoke broken English but could be understood well. He helped create a peace treaty with the Pilgrims and the Indians, with basic rules, such as do not hurt us and we will not hurt you, and if someone wars against you we shall help you, and if someone wars against us you shall help us. Samoset then introduced the Pilgrims to Squanto, who spoke better English, and became their interpreter. He taught the Indians the Indians taught the Pilgrims how to grow corn, where to fish, and gather other foods, and he also taught them other profitable knowledge that helped the Pilgrims prosper. In return for the Indians' favors, they set up a large feast to share, and it became known as the First Thanksgiving. To regroup, the common experiences that the colonists had shared were the difficulties of sickness and lack of food when starting their settlements. The differences were that the natives attacked the Spanish, while up north they helped the English Pilgrims greatly. Also, the Pilgrims had no sponsors and a much harsher environment, while Columbus was just the opposite. The purpose for the 2 voyages was also very different. The Spanish were solely looking for power and control over the natives, and wanted all the riches of the new land, while the English Pilgrims wanted religious freedom. The leaders of the Spanish were selfish, while the leaders of the Pilgrims were loving and caring. Imagine how much more prosperous the Pilgrims would have been with more funds and sponsors, with a less harsh environment. But who is to tell what would have happened if they landed in the Spanish area? Maybe the natives would have attacked them anyway, and it would have been just the same fate.
This was comparing Spanish and British America, and I hope you enjoyed the video.